activities, it does have that notion of inspiration to it, a kind of quietude that leads to inspiration, an individuality that leads to inspiration. But there's nothing unique about painting in that sense, or the process you're describing is not at all unique to your business. I think at this little end of the table, I think each of us at one moment or other has had that thought sort of pop unbidden.
Yeah, I was going to say, exactly. You're absolutely right. I was going to bring us back to the beginning of this whole meeting. Sex. Or at least it looks like it. No, your palm sweat.
Pure mathematics, sure road to orgasm.
Shh, quiet, please. There's children watching.
It doesn't seem like sex to me. The greatest moments are, well, a little bit in the design of the experiments, but then when the data are in and we sit around the computer and look at the plots and the hypothesis, we're getting close here. Well, can we find some way of conditionalizing? I mean, what if we just look at half of the subjects? What does it look like? And pretty soon out of this chaos comes like an answer to a question. An answer to a question. And there's a story in the data, and it's extremely gratifying, but it's not like sex.
Well, they're different. They're different ways.
What happens if it's the wrong story?
Well, then we have to change the story.
No, we have to change the reality. If it's the wrong story, then it's reality that's wrong. It's never the story. That's an advantage we have in the science business.
No, but there's always a question that gets answered. I mean, sometimes it's just a mess, and you know start over or whatever. But there's a question, and there is the answer, even if it isn't exactly what we thought it was going to be to begin with.
I'm just interested to know who the first mathematician was to describe a solution as beautiful. I mean, is it known? I've always wondered.
See, I think in Greece you couldn't tell, because the word for beauty is also the word for nobility, fineness, moral goodness. So it's interesting. I think there is no concept of beauty in the ancient Greek world, not as such.
I don't know about mathematicians, but physicists discovered the beauty of mathematics, and in a sense, well, Einstein, Dirac, many were absolutely convinced by the beauty of the mathematics. That they were right.
But we forget, for example, Christopher Wren was professor of astronomy, and if he had to surrender every other skill he'd had, he would want to retain that of a mathematician. And it seems to me, reading very crudely what's left, admittedly in his legacy, thought of mathematics and beauty as completely interchangeable. In fact, mathematics really defined what beauty was for him. So I mean, I was wondering if it was older than that, or.
Well, I'm sure it's much older.
The mathematical theories of beauty go back to Plato's Timaeus, and of course, which influenced the whole medieval conception of what beauty was. And the building of the Gothic cathedral came out of this sense that that one was transcribing into stone the music of the spheres.
But and actually, when you look at science as it's done, it has a great deal to do with building a house. It's very largely hammering and clattering and a lot of talk. It's not a solitary activity.
But it has some of the same impact we've been speaking, I think. It has some of the same impact that we've been talking about with these other artistic acts. There's nothing quite like, and we always feel this pang of jealousy when this happens, but you open a paper and you see the solution. A solution to this world of problems that we've all been struggling with and battling, and it seems an endless confusion, and it seems impossible, and there it is. And you see this thing, and it's a solution. And there's no question that there's an aesthetic, a feeling, a chill, whatever you would like to call it, that you encounter on that moment. And as I say, usually jealousy as well.
May I ask you, have you ever clung to a formula? I have a good reason for asking this. I won't tell you why. Ever clung to, let's say, a mathematical formula, against all rationality, simply because it looks more aesthetic than another, that there is an aesthetic hold of that particular formula on you. And you, in spite of the fact that rationally and procedurally, it is wrong. You know somehow it's wrong. Have you ever clung to it, trying to prove it right, simply because of its aesthetic appeal?
None of us, but I think some of our colleagues would.
Since we're talking about beauty and consolation, we're talking about beauty being brief. Do we all agree? Because I don't. I think that when you see something really beautiful, like an orchid or whatever it happens to be, that the memory of that can come back to console even years later. I think that it comes into us and becomes part of us if we found it really beautiful and really moving. I don't think it ever goes away.
Surely we should think about the religious paradigm here, because it seems to me it's a matter of logic that you're consoled for something you've lost, and that is what consolation is. And there are some things that we have lost which we can put behind, the loss of which we can put behind us, but there are other things that we either have lost or are destined to lose, our life being the most important, which, as it were, define our condition. It defines our condition, that we're in that condition of loss, in that state of loss. And that, after all, is just the idea of being cast out from paradise, for which our religion, talking about Christianity, offers a consolation. The consolation is something which has to be renewed constantly. That's why things like religious services, the Mass, and sacred service occur again and again every week. This isn't a consolation which, once you've got it, that's it, it's finished. Because what it is doing is reconciling you to a permanent condition of loss, of being, as it were, only the reduced part of what you might be. And, of course, we're in a condition now of scepticism and unbelief, but this experience of coming back to something that restores you to a condition from which you are by nature fallen, that is something which is deep down in our civilization, and we perhaps need to renew it. And when we don't renew it through religious services, maybe we renew it through things like the concert hall and the theatre.
It seems to me that art, sports, the beauty of natural, orchids, birds, and so on, they provide consolation because they come up when we want to say it's not been all bad. It's always a reference to the past. When we say the future will be better, that's not consolation. That's hope. And it has nothing to do with being ephemeral. It's a project. If I could come back to God, it seems to me that in the old days, God was the name for the source of consolation and also for the source of hope. And in those days, we were able to bring these great moments, the ecstatic, orgasmic, whatnot moments that we look back on and say, well, it wasn't really so bad, together with our hopes for our descendants, our grandchildren, the future of the human race, and so on. That was what God did for us, to make the source of consolation and the source of hope identical. As the intellectuals, the mandarins, have become less religious, they've separated the source of hope, politics, from the source of consolation. Sports, beauty, the arts, grandchildren, orchids, whatnot. I don't think there's much point in trying to figure out within the realm of the consolatory the possible answers to the question, was it really as bad as all that? I'm not sure there's a point in trying to make any interesting distinction between natural beauty and artistic beauty, between mass culture and high culture, between any of these, between grandchildren and friendship on the one hand and the birds and the flowers on the other hand, because these will remain forever idiosyncratic. Everybody's answer to the question, was it really that bad? Or, wasn't there something good?
This is just a question of you, a question for information. Isn't the complaint has been that consolation is I think it was Martha said, too weak, really, annoyingly Prozac-like, bromide-like, kind of weak thing to say about what I think is actually completely the wrong question to ask of beauty. I much prefer a question of whether beauty surprises than consoles, but we're worried about this kind of stroking business. But consolation's too weak for, what the Mass does, which I always, as a lapsed Jewish whose business this really oughtn't to be, redemption is much. Is that not? Or do you think redemption and consolation are the same thing?
Well, in this case, consolation for this fallen state is redemption, presumably. Or
right,
this is
but that's
a step
much
on the way
stronger than
towards
consolation,
it. Yes, I agree. I agree that you can be consoled by something even when you're not yet redeemed by it.
Right.
For the record,
as a convert from Christianity to Judaism, I guess what I liked about Judaism was the idea that no consolation, but getting out there in the world and acting. This is the world there is. This is the chance you get. So do something.
The thing is that God is something or someone, I don't know, something or someone, it doesn't matter, both. Whatever you say about him or her is true, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to say it. If we're able to pronounce whatever, if we are able to make any judgment, if we are able to curse him or to praise him, it will still be true. That's by definition. God is what by definition cannot be offended. Because he allows us to do that. So it's up to us.
A lot of record of his offence, though.
Oh, well, some, yeah. But then we're talking about religion. I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about faith, rather. Or you can make it otherwise.
When I
believe
raised
he
this,
exists, but I don't care about religion.
When I raised this, I didn't mean to raise the theological question about the existence or non-existence of God, but to remind people of the fact that consolation is not necessarily a once-off or ephemeral thing, but there is this idea of consolation as a repeated enactment, something that you go through and which perhaps requires ritual. And even non-believers perhaps do this. This ritual reaffirmation of one's membership of the tribe, so to speak. And that may be...
I'm fascinated as a sort of... Well, actually, I'm not an academic or a scientist. I'm not a creator of art, but I'm the only full-time practicing professional musician here, I think. And I sing a lot of sacred music. I sing a lot of performances of Handel's Messiah. It's a sort of big tradition in England. And some of the most profound performances of sacred music, particularly Messiah, because it's the most traditional oratorio in England, some of the most profound performances are not the ones where you've got the instruments that Handel would have heard and all the ornamentation that